Hello, I'm Destiny Nash, and I wanted to discuss the connection between soil health and environmental justice. Soil health is the ability to sustain plant and animal productivity, improve water and air quality, and promote species health. It is essential for a healthy ecosystem as it helps to sustain food production, in which 95% of the world's food come from soil, which avoids soil degradation, as well as eliminates pests and illnesses. Soil health is essential for environmental justice as it helps develop food sovereignty/security. However, the difficulty of owning land historically and maintenance requirements make healthy soil inaccessible. Creating green spaces in urban areas are difficult due to the use of irrigation, fertilizers, pesticides, and building waste that affects soil function. The changes in soil health will continue to hit marginalized communities and farmers the hardest, with discrimination of land ownership and pesticide exposure. Relevance. Regarding the discussions that we've had in class so far on how the land was treated during colonialism and westward expansion, soil health is a crucial problem for environmental justice. In Dorcetta E. Taylor's book, she discusses how the right of white settlers and squatters to purchase indigenous land first was supported through the Removal and Preemption Acts of 1830. Indigenous people prioritized the connection with nature, including soil care. But as westward expansion continued, many were pushed out of their land to infertile and marginal areas. Even with the potential of compensation, that would still not rectify the loss of land, their people, and increased difficulty in farming. Julia Whitaker's book discusses movements such as the Mexican farm workers' resistance movement led by Cesar Chavez in 1965 and 1971 to assemble a union and prevent pesticide misuse. The farm workers' movement highlighted the poor working conditions due to race, including exposure to uncontrolled toxins and exploitation of labor. Land ownership and exposure to pesticides have caused a decrease in green spaces for historically marginalized communities. The first key issue I will talk about is pesticides, how they are impacting our environment. Pesticides are harming soil health by killing off essential organisms, reducing biological diversity, and harming the environment. Pesticides kill or injure soil invertebrates such as earthworms, ants, beetles, and ground nesting bees in 71% of cases tested. This drastically outweighs the positive or no significant effects of pesticide use, which was also 1.4% and 28.1%. There's also a loss of functions from these organisms that support agricultural sustainability and soil maintenance. Earthworms can build up to 8,900 kilometers of channels per hectare, reducing soil erosion by 50% through improved soil porosity and water infiltration. Pesticides are used to get rid of pests, but they also affect the health of the soil and disrupt natural cycles that support plant growth. This is especially true for important organisms such as the earthworms that affect the health of the soil and disrupt natural cycles. How this relates to environmental justice: pesticide use is an environmental justice cause due to its disproportionate exposure of factories and government agencies using a cost of benefit analysis, as waste sites are usually located in lower income areas and communities of color. Despite intentional placements, establishments in low income areas do not prioritize reducing chemical exposure and pollution as they would in affluent areas. Farm workers are disproportionately affected by pesticides, and the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, has a history of allowing this to continue if the effect on the public is not too harmful and the use of pesticide works as intended. In addition, the EPA Pesticide Office has often disregarded the federal action to address environmental justice in minority populations and low-income populations effective order that was brought upon in 1994, which instructed government authorities to use current legislation to protect BIPOC and low-income people from environmental pollution, this has not been effectively carried out for over 25 years. The issue of pesticide exposure is not being prioritized by manufacturers and agencies, which is costing people's health and well-being. And on the side of pictures at the bottom right, these are some of the canisters and containers that would be dumped in a urban waste area that were previously used for pesticides. My final key issue is land ownership. Owning land, or at the very least having the green space to cultivate, has always been valuable, even if the reasonings were different. But depending on the circumstances of many farmers, especially those who have faced centuries of discrimination, can determine the importance of keeping soil healthy for them. Tenant farmers often emphasize present production above future production, whereas owner-operators prioritize future production, which does factor in policies for prioritizing soil health. Making the most out of the land with the focus of producing as many crops as possible at fast rates, even at the expense of the health of the land, has always been encouraged through the agricultural industry, which in the United States was founded through exploitative and unsustainable methods of using people and natural resources while blocking people of color from having food sovereignty. We see it in the past with the laws from the 1800s, such as the Dawes Act and Indian Removal Act, which intended to strip Native Americans of their sovereignty and divide them into small, undesirable areas, usually with poor soil health. We see this with the picture on the top right of different Native American groups being split up and their direction of removal during that time. That continued discrimination through the United States Department of Agriculture and farming programs dispossessed 98% of Black farmers from owning land, starting from 1910, as seen in the graph at the bottom right. It went from 1 in 7 Black farmers owning land, continuing to decrease through financial discrimination and intimidation that includes violence, that brings the number of Black-owned farmers today to be less than 1%. These forms of discrimination not only separate people from their connection with the land, but make different forms of farming that support soil health from becoming widely implemented, such as indigenous practices, which do not focus on the overconsumption of natural resources. Being the caretaker of land should not be exclusive, especially to those who have been taking care of the environment for centuries as equals. It is imperative for the health of the soil. Potential solutions. Many of the pesticide solutions are being directed towards federal government agencies such as the EPA, since they do house the Department of Pesticide Regulation. This includes the EPA should amend the Food Quality Protection Act or Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act to include people exposed to pesticides in the reasonable assurance that no damage would follow safety thresholds, and define no unreasonable adverse effects in a way that acknowledges and decreases risk to agricultural workers. Strict guidelines and laws on the usage of pesticides will not only be used if the effects will not cause guarantee harm, and will lessen the room for cost and benefit methods which cause disproportionate exposure. This would also include a full report of pesticides, exposure effects, and the chemicals that are contained within all communities to accurately assess its influence. To also decrease the corporate interest in harmful agricultural methods to spread, a third party must audit the EPA's operation and management practices. This third party could include various community members, especially farmers, in making sure environmental practices and funding are effectively being carried out. When it comes to the issues involving land ownership, this includes nature-based solutions as well as support in different sectors of society in making land accessible for minority farmers to create food sovereignty. Indigenous soil care includes conservation practices such as regenerative grazing that helps to build soil health, which improves farm profitability, human and ecological health, and food system resilience by utilizing soil health and adaptive livestock management concepts. Nature-based solutions can be applied to farm owners as well as tenants, since keeping up with the high demands of the agricultural industry can do more harm environmentally for the sake of overproduction and are usually much more expensive. These methods of regenerative farming must prioritize fair and restorative access to land, funding, legal safeguards, help, and platforms, especially for the historically discriminated. This can come from the support financially and lawfully from public and private institutions to ensure that the land reaches these communities. Another solution is a community advisory board for soil health activities and to prioritize initiatives with environmental justice communities as priorities for climate funding. Once again, a third party to ensure the priorities and support from these solutions and governmental claims reach these environmental justice communities. Takeaways. A takeaway for me when researching was learning more about the difficulties that occur when owning farmland, especially for marginalized groups, how renting land can affect what type of farming is done, which can take a toll on soil health. It demonstrates how important land ownership is, especially on a large scale, and what farming practices are common in the agricultural industry, which also includes whether pesticide use is incorporated or not. Career-wise, I want to become a sustainability analyst where I collect, analyze, and present data on various aspects involving environmental impacts and sustainable solutions. This relates to my topic due to data collection and analysis of soil factors such as moisture, nutrients, and organism biodiversity can help in determining whether the soil, especially in urban areas, need healing. Based on the data results, to create more green spaces, not just for humans to enjoy and cultivate, but also for other species. It relates to my takeaway because it's prioritizing making farmland transfer easier, using data analysis to support indigenous-based practices to help and ensure the soil health in those areas. I would like all of you to know not only the importance of soil health, but how inaccessible and discriminatory land ownership is to marginalized groups, which makes access to growing green spaces for alternative farming methods difficult to thrive in the grand agricultural industry, the same agricultural industry that pushes the importance of pesticides at the cost of the environment and people. I learned more about solutions to assist in decreasing chemical exposure and the additional history of discriminatory practices used that have denied and continue to deny people to care for the land, not as conquerors, but as stewards that values the importance of maintaining the environment, not only for themselves, but others. We're excited, and thank you.